Okay, it is 95 degrees. I think I am approximately in the appropriate temperature space to talk about The Unbroken, a desert fantasy, my favorite fantasy of the year. I was not expecting that. So, like I do with a lot of review videos, I'm going to just talk at the top. No reference to any plot elements or synopsis, just my feelings about the book, what my experience was. I loved it. I loved it so much I bought it. I'm 30 pages in. I devoured it. I spent a lot of my free time reading it when I could have been doing other things. I have talked about it at length with many people, and I still want to talk about it. It's the best fantasy I have read that is trying to do what it's doing, and it's a freaking debut. So, talk about an author I have my eye on now. So, now we can talk about, I guess, a bit of synopsis. This is military fantasy. We are basically taking place in an occupied territory. We are coming into this occupied territory in hopes of basically squashing a rebellion, is how we start the story, with Terrain and Luca, our main characters. Terrain is from this land, but she was taken as a 5-year-old to be a part of the military and is what is called a Sand, which is a second-class, lower-class citizen, but she loves the country that has taken her in and trained her. She feels immense loyalty to those people and just wants to prove her worth. And then we have Luca, who is a princess fighting for her throne, and she thinks that if she can fix this rebellion situation, if she can prove that she can be a good, just ruler, her uncle will step down and let her rule. So that's the premise. That's the start. And I was very apprehensive when I picked it up because I knew it was military fantasy, I knew it was rebellion fantasy, and I knew it was low magic. Now, military fantasy, I didn't know what type of military fantasy it would be, because there are some military fantasy that's just really not my cup of tea when it gets very tactical and strategic on page. Like, I don't mind if that's happening, but I just get to see the effects in a military fantasy. But if I'm like at the table discussing it, like if I'm there for all the nitty-gritty details, it's not my favorite thing. I know some people really love that, especially when it's like inspired by real life battles. That's awesome. It's not my thing. But this one is more that we have a character who is a part of the military and that this military force is going to be used in hopes of helping keep peace in the streets. So that's the extent of that. It actually goes more into other aspects of how you can maybe negotiate the end of a rebellion and what happens when things get heated. Like, it's not a traditional two armies fighting each other on land type of military fantasy. It's a rebellion story. I have read many a rebellion story in my fantasy days. So many. I actually don't know very many that aren't rebellion based or have some sort of strife. I mean, one of my favorite series has that Mistborn. But I will say that is not my favorite part of Mistborn because I don't think it's done with the nuance that I would like. And most of the time, I'm just like, this is going to be very complex and very messy, and then we're not going to deal with the mess. We're going to have some deus ex machina and fix it, or we're going to have to focus on a different thing that makes the rebellion less important so that we can't even focus on this thing we set up. And I usually don't like that. You know, like, I just haven't found a rebellion story that has satisfied me and my current tastes and what I would want from that type of thematic level. And I also feel like sometimes the rebellion just starts all of the sudden. I have a lot of complaints on certain executions with rebellion fantasy and sci-fi. But that turned out to not be an issue here, and we'll go into some of the things I really appreciated and how these themes were handled. The last one, though, low magic. Low magic, man. I am a high magic person. Usually if I don't like a fantasy, one of my main complaints is this felt like historical fiction. Where was my magic? You know, like if I wanted to read a really old school historical fiction, I could do that, you know. For me, a fantasy usually has to be more than just we've created another world. It has to be we've created another world and there's magic. There is magic, and I foresee us exploring the magic a lot more in future books, but it is not a big component, although kind of like the Greenbone saga, the magic is important. Even though you don't see it happening often, it's a big motivator for one of our main characters. So it's actually really important for the plot for how little you see it on page. And I find that really cool as well. So those were all my concerns, but it didn't seem to bother me whatsoever. This is like, I like it more than The Mask of Mirrors, and you guys know how much I love The Mask of Mirrors. And I think part of that is Terrain and Luca are amazing characters. They are sympathetic, messy, flawed characters with really interesting perspectives for the story being told, which is this occupied nation and a rebellion, and how do we resolve this situation? And Terrain has this loyalty to her troops. The fellow Sans, she's lieutenant. Luca really wants her throne, but she wants to be a moral leader. She wants to have the loyalty of people, but she doesn't want to be feared like her father or her uncle. And you get to see these people start off in one position and transition to other positions, and all of it makes sense based off their agendas, based off what we know about them. You will dislike a lot of decisions these characters make, but none of them will feel out of character, which is my favorite thing. I really love Terrain. I think Terrain's my favorite. The amount of growth she goes through in this story, the amount of introspection and inner conflict, I think it was done fantastically. She's just fantastic. I love Terrain. She's also incredibly attractive. Like, this shouldn't matter, but like one of the most attractive characters written on Page to date. We talk about this a lot in the Space Sirens Book Club book chat. She's on the main cover. She's amazing. And then Luca's great because I've read, again, many a rebellion story where you have the sympathetic noble who's here to help and understands. And we push against that here. Like, she's still a sympathetic character. I mean, your mileage on how much you like or dislike her is going to vary based off, what you think when you read it, of course. But I found that she remains likable most of the time, even when she potentially makes decisions that I find ill-advised, to say the least. And I think that's so amazing because there are characters that I love, but I don't think are realistic expectations for what someone would do with the goals and agenda that this character has. Like, for example, one of her main goals is to become queen of her kingdom. And that goal does not necessarily always go with get rid of the rebellion peacefully. Like, sometimes you can't do both. Sometimes things weren't mutually exclusive, and then you got to see what Luca did when things couldn't be both, based off, her morals and her goals. And I found that fantastic and way more realistic than many other fantasy books that I read. Another theme I thought was handled really well was found family, and it was a messy found family. But there were several chapter titles that were about families being formed or broken, because the position of Terrain as someone who is from the diaspora of this country, coming back, who can't actually even be a part of the Empire because the Empire's prejudice. Her location in this world doesn't exist, her and the rest of the Sans. And it's through her that you try and figure out where does she belong, where does she choose to be, where should her loyalties lie? And I thought that was fantastic because I think that was a big issue for the character and was a big motivator for what helped her choose the decisions she made. And I think that was an angle in the found family I don't see utilized as much, and I really love that. So that, the imperialism themes, how this rebellion was handled, thematically an A-plus story with, a roller coaster of a plot for me. I mean, I thought it was jam-packed with tense moments from beginning to end, with all the quiet scenes that I love. And the quiet scenes were stressful, because when the quiet scenes are happening, you're just like, well, this can't last. And you just get stressed because you want to stay in this quiet moment, this moment of peace, but it's too fragile and it's so stressful. And then characters keep making decisions, and you can't even really be mad about the decisions per se. Well, some you can. There are some decisions I get mad at, but it's mostly just everything's just so messy. It's just so messy. And I love how it handles the mess. I think it handles the mess really well. It makes a mess, and it handles the mess. And that leads me to why I like this book, because it's a complete thought. It gives you a mess, and it handles the mess in a way that feels satisfying for one book, but but we need more books. We need more books. And I think that was masterfully done. How is this a debut? I have read books by really seasoned authors who don't do what this book did, at least for me and my standards and what I wanted. There are so many things that are done so well. The anxiety representation, the pushing back against certain ideas when you're in certain different classist levels. there are so many things that are done so well and done in a way that perfectly balances thematic, agenda with storytelling, with real characters. Like, they're not sounding boards, they're not megaphones for your theme. You just see this theme because this person's just acting like this, and I just really loved it. It's my type of fantasy, so I guess if we have any overlap, you really need to pick it up. But I also have a few other books that might help you decide, is this like a book I should be looking into? Should I be raising it up my TBR? Surprisingly, a sci-fi is one I'll talk about. This is A Memory Called Empire, which, if you don't know, I love. I have like a way too long review about that on my channel. Spoiler free, but I definitely talk about the thematic content a fair bit. And so that one is very similar to how Terrain and the main character in Memory Called Empire and Mahit are basically fish out of water who like love an empire who doesn't love them. It's a big theme in both of them. Both of them kind of have civil wars and rebellions. Memory Called Empire is a lot slower paced though, a lot meatier, denser. The next one is the Davabad trilogy. Desert fantasy, right? Like, if you like desert fantasy, they're both desert fantasy. But what I would say is, and I'm thinking of like a specific friend when I'm saying this, so hopefully she watches the video, but if you don't like how the tensions in Davabad are handled throughout the entire trilogy, which they're handled fairly well, but I would say, once again, I was set up a messy scenario and I didn't know if I liked the conclusion of the mess over the entire trilogy, but you really liked exploring that mess and tension, it's very similar to what's in here. So I would highly recommend that. And then, of course, I mentioned The Mask of Mirrors, one of I think it was previously the newest fantasy book I had read this year that had stolen my heart. It was the same experience in terms of character work and world building, where I was instantly hooked from the beginning. And they both have name soup. I think it's Venetian names in A Mask of Mirrors, and here it's French and Middle Eastern. So there's a lot of names. It was kind of hard for me to keep track in both books, but once I got the groove, I was completely fine. And in my case, for both of them, could not stop reading from beginning to end, bought copies of both, even though I didn't need to. I had access through eArcs or the library. And the last one I'll mention is City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is also a book that talks about imperialistic themes, although, like I said, I don't like the theme work as much as I do in this one. But if you just have read that one and you liked that part of the story, it's stronger in here, in my opinion. So that's the review for this one. I loved it. Hopefully I've given you useful information to help you decide if you would love it too. Obviously, all book reading experiences are subjective. I think I just really loved how it made me feel. There were lots of ups and downs. My heart it did all the things you need it to do for a 5-star read. And if you made it this far, I feel like I already made you guys leave a desert emoji in a Friday Reads, but I'm going to make it again. Desert emoji. I am not a creative human. And any questions or thoughts down in the comments, spoiler tags for any spoiler things you want to talk about, and if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.